Welcome. Thank you for joining us on this webinar on the Global Connection Plan. My name is Sarah Barron. I am one of the members of the Northeastern Jurisdiction Global Structure Task Force, and I am so pleased to be one of the presenters tonight. The Global Connection Plan aims to create more justice and equality in the global structure of the United Methodist Church. We've been working together for over 2 years to find the best ways to create that justice, and we're excited to share it with you today. There will be 3 presentations as part of this webinar and a brief question and answer time after each of our presentations, meant mostly for questions of clarity. After we've all presented, there will be a longer time for whatever questions emerge. The first presenter tonight is Marias Casicco, who will begin with a word of prayer.
My friends, let us pray. Father God Almighty, we thank you for your ability to unite us as your people. Thank you for the gift of technology, that everyone can be together through the means of technology. We pray for the guidance and leadership of your Holy Spirit, that we as a denomination, as the people of the United Methodist Church, can move forward under the leadership of your Holy Spirit to make disciples for the transformation of the world. This is our prayer. In Jesus' name, amen. So good evening again. As it has been said, my name is Marias Casicco, and I will take you through the first portion of our presentation. And we will begin with an attempt to answer the main question: what problems are we solving by this proposal? As you can see, those of you who participate during the General Conference and travel around the denomination, we are often confronted by the question, why is it that we come to the General Conference and most of our time is spent discussing matters of concern to the context of the United States alone, and only a fewer portion of the conference deals with matters of everybody's concern. So under that basis, we determined that this proposal, will attempt to give a solution to that concern. This proposal will empower the global connection to thrive at being the global church, and empower the connections and regions to thrive at being United Methodists in ways most appropriate to their context. Also, the proposed structure is really Christ-focused. It extends community, it provides greater global equality, and it also provides greater access to services and participation in the structures. And it shapes the United Methodist Church agenda in so many ways. Now, let us look at the global connection aspect of this proposed restructuring. The global connection shall be responsible for Constitution of the United Methodist Church, the Global Book of the United Methodist Discipline, the Global Social Principles, and Global Connectional Budget. It will also look at aspects that concern the global responsibilities of the current General Conference as defined on the 2012 Book of Discipline and in actions of previous General Conferences, except for those matters delegated elsewhere. Hearing reports about ministry successes and challenges from each connection, and providing opportunities for the discussion of the global issues rather than local issues. The number and boundaries of the United Methodist Church, those issues will be addressed at the global connection level. The global connection shall also be responsible for defining the power and roles of connectional regions, annual conferences, missionary conferences, districts, and charge conferences. The number of Episcopal areas within each of the United Methodist connections, as well as defining the powers, the duties, and the privileges of Episcopal leaders. It will also be under the Global Connections responsibilities the decisions regarding the funding of connection and regional conferences, the global agency's statements of purpose, accountability to the statements of purpose, and sizes and makeup of global agency boards of directors, as well as the defining the powers and the duties of elders, deacons, supply pastors, local pastors, deaconesses, and home missionaries. On our estimation, it is also the responsibility of the global connection, the definition of the conditions, privileges, and the duties of church membership. Standards for the election of delegates to the Global Connectional Conference. The Global Connectional Conference shall replace the General Conference as we know it today, which currently has full legislative power over all matters distinctively connectional. It has no executive or administrative power, just like the current General Conference does not have those powers. The Global Connectional Conference shall focus on global matters during its quadrennial meetings, which shall last no less than 2 weeks. It shall last less than 2 weeks. It's our anticipation that with this new restructuring, the time will be reduced. The Global Connectional Conference shall also be constituted in the same ways as the current General Conference, shall be assigned responsibilities that are similar to the current General Conference, and it shall be subjected to the same restrictive rules as the current General Conference, and shall function in ways that are similar to the current General Conference. The Global Connectional Conference shall also consist of no less than 600, but no more than 1,000 delegates, with an equal number of lay and clergy delegates elected by annual conferences and missionary conferences. The formula for determining the number of delegates from each annual conference shall be the same for all the annual conferences and missionary conferences, with the provision that each annual conference and missionary conference shall elect at least one lay and one clergy delegate. Concordant churches, affiliated autonomous Methodist churches, and affiliated United churches may elect delegates to the Global Connectional Conference. The Methodist Church in Great Britain may elect 4 delegates with voice and vote, but the United Methodist Church may send 2 delegates each year to the British Methodist Conference as well. Other concordant churches may elect 2 delegates with voice and vote. Affiliated autonomous Methodist churches and affiliated United churches may elect 2 delegates with voice and without voice. If such a church has more than 70,000 full members, it is entitled then to send 3 delegates with voice but no vote. How about the Council of Bishops and the Global Judicial Council? Based on this proposal, the Council of Bishops, the Global Judicial Council, and the global agencies shall serve the entire United Methodist Global Connection. As you know, currently most of the general agencies, even though they are on that category of general agencies, they really serve the U.S.-based churches than churches outside the U.S. It's our intent to globalize all the general agencies of the church. The Council of Bishops shall continue to have similar responsibilities and shall function in ways that are similar to the current Council of Bishops. The Global Connectional Conference shall continue to have similar responsibilities and shall function in ways that are similar to the current Judicial Council. In addition, It shall have the option to review all decisions by connectional judicial committees and regional committees on appeal. It shall also handle matters that reference both the Global Book of Discipline and one or more connectional books of discipline. The Global Connectional Conference, it shall also look at matters that concern the agencies within the global connection, which are defined as global. They shall be structured to fully serve all of the connection and shall establish boards and directors with members equitably distributed across all regions of the global connection. So, my friends, I will pause here. As you heard my colleague Sarah on the introduction, there are two more presenters following me, and we shall have a question and answer session at the end. But if you have an immediate question at this point, feel free to express that.
Mariah, it doesn't look like we've had any questions yet, so why don't we go on to Tracy?
Good evening. My name is Tracy Merrick. I too would like to thank all of you who have joined this webinar for spending this time with us. My objective is to share information regarding the United Methodist connections and regions in our plan. First, let's take a couple of minutes and address the concept of United Methodist connections. The Global Connection Plan calls for the formation of a United Methodist connection, or otherwise known as a connection, on each continent where there are currently United Methodist churches, and that would be Africa, Asia, Europe, and North America. The purpose of the connections will be to provide a way to focus on the church's mission within the context of each continent and thinking about its nations, cultures, languages, legal implications, traditions, and other important realities. One of the questions we've received is, well, what about South America? Although there are many Methodist churches in South America and some in Australia, there are currently no United Methodist churches there. Since some of those denominations were originally a part of one of the predecessor organizations associated with what has become the United Methodist Church, those denominations are considered affiliate autonomous Methodist churches or affiliated United churches. In the future, if United Methodist churches are established in South America, the Global Connectional Conference can easily decide to create a connection for South America at the appropriate time. Regarding the responsibilities of the connections, as you will see on the slides that are being displayed, we've assigned quite a few responsibilities to the connections. In addition to a global book of discipline, this plan includes the option of connectional books of discipline, one for each connection, with sections tailored to meet the needs for ministry in the context of the connection. The connection has the responsibility to adopt its own book of discipline. For instance, the Africa connection might need to include educational requirements for clergy, which are more appropriate for that continent than what might be apropos in North America. The connection might also adopt provisions within its connectional book of discipline to meet the specific needs of the regions within its purview. As an example, the connection will need to consider legal requirements unique to certain countries that might fall within its geographic bounds. We feel these forms of flexibility are an extremely important component of this plan. The connections will also be responsible for the number and boundaries of regions within the connection, episcopal matters such as tenure, process of election, methods of assignment, retirement plans, itineracy, and standards of conduct. The connection will be responsible for clergy standards, including process for ordination, conference relationship, and clergy membership. The connections will also have the responsibility for defining the need for the presence of global agencies within the boundaries of its connection, for organizing connection-specific agencies with attention given to agency statements of purpose, accountability, and makeup of their boards of directors. The connections will have financial responsibilities. They will need to address financial considerations such as the connection's budget, pensions, and distribution of funds to support regional conferences. Connections are encouraged to develop legislation for the Global Connectional Conference regarding the Global Book of Discipline. If a connection happens to be organized without regions, the roles and responsibilities of the region shall be added to the roles and responsibilities of that connection. As an example, the United Methodist Connection in Asia could decide that there's no need for any regions within the Philippines. In this case, the Asian connection would assume the roles assigned to a region. One of those would be the election of bishops. Let's talk for a moment about the connectional conferences. The connectional conferences will be quadrennial gatherings prior to the Global Connectional Conference, during which matters related to the connection will be addressed. The Connectional Conference will function like the Global Connectional Conference and will have responsibility for connection-specific considerations and legislation. As far as membership is concerned, the delegates to the Connectional Conference will consist of the delegates to the Global Connectional Conference. If this count happens to be less than 100, delegates to the regional conferences within the connection will be added to bring the number to 100. In each case, an equal number of lay and clergy delegates would be chosen. Within the connection, there are some organizational considerations. The organizations which are specified here, and any organizations which the connection decides to organize, will be structured to serve the connection in which they are operating. The expectation is that the following organizations will probably be needed. The Connectional College of Bishops shall have the responsibility for leading the connection and shall function in ways similar to the current jurisdictional colleges of bishops. The Connectional Judicial Committee will deal with issues of law relating to the connection's book of discipline. Any connection-specific agencies shall be accountable to the Connectional Conference, and their boards of directors shall be elected by the regional conferences within the connection. Any global agencies with a presence within a connection shall be organized to be responsive to the needs of the connection and shall be accountable to both the Connectional Conference as well as the global agency's board of directors. So what are the benefits of such an arrangement? One of the goals of the Global Connection Plan is to bring about greater equity between the geographic entities across the denomination. Presently, the central conferences do not have the same standing as the jurisdictions in the United States. As an example, the central conferences make up almost 40% of the membership of the United Methodist Church and hold less than 15 of the slots on agency boards of directors. This provision was an action of our General Conference. The hope is that our proposal will take a major step in equalizing the opportunities for those outside the United States to help shape the future of the United Methodist Church. Another goal of this proposal is to give greater attention to the contexts of ministry across the denomination, to strengthen ministries across each connection, and to provide a structure which will support conversations in settings outside the United States in ways that don't exist today. Presently, the volume of U.S.-specific legislation addressed by General Conference is estimated to be at least 50%, and perhaps higher. This means that Central Conference delegates spend their time listening to and voting on U.S.-related topics with little attention given to topics which are much more pressing from a global perspective. One of the goals of this proposal is to move the U.S.-specific topics and legislation to the North American Connectional Conference. This will free the Global Connectional Conference to focus on global matters and will result, we believe, in a shorter Global Connectional Conference. In short, we are attempting to strengthen the global connection so that it can excel at matters of global nature and strengthen the connections so that they can excel at ministry within their contexts. I would now like to take a few moments and focus on the concept of regions as expressed in our proposal. Under the Global Connection Plan, the central conferences and jurisdictional conferences will be restructured as regions. Regions will be established geographically, just as jurisdictions and central conferences are today. Unlike the current structure, all regions will have the same authority and responsibilities. As an example, presently, central conferences can modify certain provisions in the Book of Discipline, while jurisdictions cannot. As far as structure, the current 7 central conferences and 5 jurisdictional conferences shall become 12 regions. The United Methodist Connection in Africa will have 3 regions: the African region, Congo region, and West Africa region. The United Methodist Connection in Asia will have 1 region, the Philippines. Of course, as I said earlier, the Connectional Conference could decide not to have a region, and that connection then would function as a region as well. The United Methodist Connection in Europe will have 3 regions: Central Southern Europe, German, and Northern Europe and Eurasia. United Methodist Connection in North America will have 5 regions: North Central, Northeastern, South Central, Southeastern, and Western. The connections will have the opportunity to change the number and boundaries of regions within their geographic areas. The responsibilities of regions are significant, and all 12 will be responsible for the same sorts of functions, including the promotion of the evangelistic, educational, missionary, and benevolent interests of the Church, and to provide for interests and institutions within its boundaries. That should sound familiar. That's in the current Book of Discipline. Each region shall be responsible for the number and boundaries of annual conferences, boundaries of episcopal areas, and the election and assignment of bishops. Regions will also be responsible for election of members to global and connectional agency boards and regional committees, legislation to the Global Connectional Conference regarding the Global Book of Discipline, legislation to its Connectional Conference regarding the Connectional Book of Discipline. We believe this option will provide greater opportunities to strengthen ministries in local contexts, something we feel is very important in this diverse world. And a region will also be responsible for a regional budget. Many of these roles are easily recognizable as roles which jurisdictions and central conferences currently play, but not all of them. Under the proposal, as I said earlier, all regions will perform these same functions. Regional conferences. The regional conferences, just as central conferences and jurisdictional conferences now, will meet quadrennially within 1 year following the gathering of the Global Connectional Conference. The number of delegates and composition guidelines of regional conferences will be determined by the Global Connectional Conference. Regional conference membership will consist of equal numbers of laity and clergy, and no regional conference shall have less than 100 members. The delegates to the Global Connectional Conference shall be considered the first delegates from an annual conference elected to a regional conference. As far as entities within each region, again, the regional agencies shall be structured in such a way to serve the Church within the region. It is anticipated that regions will organize at least the following entities: a regional college of bishops, which will have the same roles as defined for colleges of bishops in the Constitution; a regional committee on the episcopacy to fulfill the provisions currently in the 2012 Book of Discipline; a regional committee on appeals to hear and decide the appeal of a clergy person or bishop following the decision of a trial committee. So what do we think of the benefits of this regional concept? We believe it's very important to equalize the jurisdictional and central conferences across the United Methodist Church and make them regions. We believe it is equally important to remove the term central conference from our polity. it carries a lot of baggage, especially as we think about the concept of central jurisdiction. We've given some thought to annual conferences and have had some questions about them. Our plan does not change provisions regarding annual conferences. The number and boundaries of annual conferences will not be changed until altered by a region or connection. The annual conference purpose, composition, organization, responsibilities, and agencies will remain unchanged unless adapted by a connectional conference. The annual conferences will be responsible for electing delegates to the Global Connectional Conference, its own connectional conference, and its regional conference. I realized we have covered a great deal of detail here in this portion of the webinar. Fortunately, most of this is available in material that was shared with you in the concept proposal should you want to refer to it. I'll be glad to answer any questions which relate to this portion of the presentation.
Tracy, one question we have received is, how is this plan different from a federation of independent judicatories, for example, the Anglican Federation? Do you feel like you can answer this?
I'm not sure that I can because I don't know enough about the Anglican Federation, so I feel a little bit ill-prepared, but I can say to you that if I understand some of what that's about, I believe that those are more independent agencies than in our case. We would still be having a general global book of discipline that would hold us together in a different way than I believe is the case with the Anglicans.
Hey, thank you, Tracy. Another question we have received is, why is the tenure of bishops a connectional matter and not a global matter?
Well, right now, there are different provisions for the election and the tenure of bishops. We listened regarding that matter, and we felt that there was definitely value in continuing to allow the connections to have those unique considerations. Folks may or may not be aware of some of the issues that relate to the tenure of bishops outside the United States, especially in Africa, and what it means in terms of their assignment. And so I think that, and I believe the members of the committee felt that it was important to let that continue to be a connectional option.
All right, thank you, Tracy. Let's go now to Sarah Barron.
Hello again. Now that you've heard the nitty-gritty, I just want to review the gist with you. The 4 big changes that we're proposing are: the Global Connectional Conference will replace the General Conference and will be responsible for those functions and matters of the United Methodist Church that are global in nature. Non-global, contextual ministry matters would be assigned to 4 connections, 1 each in Africa, Asia, Europe, and North America. Each connection will have the option to organize into regions equivalent to the current central conferences in Africa, Asia, and Europe, and the jurisdictions in the United States. The proposal recommends a global book of discipline as well as connectional books of discipline. Currently, only the central conferences can adapt the book of discipline. Now, having heard our proposal, it seems reasonable that you might have some questions about what happens next. The legislation has been submitted for consideration at the 2016 General Conference. If it passes, it would change the Constitution of the United Methodist Church. The current structure, including jurisdictional conferences and central conferences, is constitutional. You may already know this, but to change the Constitution of the United Methodist Church requires a 2/3 vote of the General Conference, ratified by a 2/3 affirmative vote of all the aggregate members of the annual conferences. It is a process that can take some time to complete. It is also a very high bar. The legislation that we've proposed deals only in constitutional changes. If it passes, there will be a need for a task force to make a proposal to the 2020 General Conference with detailed legislation regarding paragraphs outside of the Constitution. This would be done consistently with the concept proposal that is a part of the packet of legislation. That is, we have a concept proposal and specific changes to paragraphs in the Constitution of the Book of Discipline, which constitute our legislation. The packet that you can download near the bottom of your screen is entitled Proposed Legislation, and that includes both the concept proposal and the legislation, along with some frequently asked question information. With awareness that the General Conference can, and likely will, change what is submitted both in legislative session and on the floor, our proposal about the task force, the one that would create legislation for General Conference 2020, is that it would have 15 members who are inclusive, who would be convened as a separate body by December 1st, 2016. They would be aimed at writing the detailed legislation that is consistent with the concept proposal to be submitted to General Conference 2020. We expect that they would meet primarily via electronic means, and that it will cost $300,000, which will be added to the Connectional Table's 2016 to 2020 quadrennial budget specifically for the work of the task force. The membership of the task force will include one member from each jurisdiction and central conference who are not members of the Connectional Table, one bishop identified by the Council of Bishops, one member of the Connectional Table, one member of the Standing Committee on Central Conference Matters. And out of these 15 members, the Connectional Table shall name the chair. In addition, they would have the opportunity to add 4 members with voice but no vote. The Connectional Table could add a general secretary of a general agency, a member of the Northeast Jurisdiction Global Structure Task Force, a person with skills in writing the needed legislation, and a person with marketing skills. The task force shall also develop and implement a plan to actively inform the denomination about its progress. So if this passes, those would be the next steps. You may also have some questions about who we are and what guided our process. Our task force was created by the Northeastern jurisdiction after a petition was referred to committee, and a committee had to be formed. The College of Bishops named us to the task force, and the first work we did was to identify our core values. They've mattered a lot to us, and I'm glad to share them with you. To be Christ-focused. The denominational structure should reflect the teachings of and empower the mission of Jesus Christ. To embody structural fairness. The denominational structure should provide for greater global equality in the church around access to services, participation in structures, and shaping the agenda of the United Methodist Church. Any plan should provide for an equitable global resourcing and distribution of apportioned funds. To extend community. Everyone everywhere must be welcome and safe in the United Methodist Church. Any new structure must honor non-essential differences and defend the essential dignity and worth of all of God's children. Speaking of extending community, you may also want to know that we did not just sit in a room and build castles in the sky by ourselves. We connected with others along the way. We talked with those who were also interested in addressing global structure issues. The Connectional Table, the Standing Committee on Central Conference Matters, and jurisdictional groups in the Western and North Central jurisdictions. We sought feedback for our first 2 proposals, and we made major revisions based on what we heard. And now, the truly frequently asked questions, the ones we've heard the most so far. They go a little bit like this. Another level of church organization? Really? We get it. But what we have doesn't work. U.S.-centric issues dominate General Conference, and there is insufficient space for true global issues. There is currently no space for people in ministry on the same continent to work out their ministry together. This plan provides space for issues to be worked out in the right place, global concerns at the global connection, and various solutions to different challenges in the places they emerge, with sufficient time and space for conversation. How are you really going to break up what goes in the Global Book of Discipline and what doesn't? The short answer is this: we didn't decide. The more nuanced answer is this: other United Methodist Church bodies are working on just that question, and we chose not to duplicate their work. In our concept proposal, we anticipate global issues in the Global Book of Discipline and everything else in the connection ones. That is a decision that would end up being made by General Conference 2020 when they pass the enacting legislation. What happens to ordination and itineracy? Ordination, orders, and licensing will be under the purview of the connections, with an acknowledgement that the roles, expectations, and needs are different around the globe. The possibility exists that the connections may allow their regions to have different requirements, and that would be a decision made by the connection as a whole. Itinerancy in the United Methodist Church refers to clergy moves within an annual conference, and by extension within a region and a connection. Consistency of ordination provisions would enable itinerancy to continue easily within connections. The task force proposal does not include a recommendation regarding whether itinerancy provisions should be included in the Global Book of Discipline or in the connectional books of discipline. Would we still truly be a global church? And I think in essence, that's one of the questions we've already heard tonight. We think yes, and we hope for the better. By assigning global responsibilities to the global connection and non-global responsibilities to the connections, this proposal allows both the global church and the connections to thrive. Currently, U.S. concerns dominate General Conference, taking time and energy that could be used to focus on global issues during that gathering. This proposal will empower the global connectional conference to thrive at enabling being the global church, and empower the connections and regions to thrive at being United Methodist in ways most appropriate to their context. And finally, how much is this going to cost? There will probably be some additional costs related to connectional conferences and committees, etc., but these costs may be offset by a possible reduction in the cost related to the meeting of the global connection. If the business of the North America connection is removed from the agenda of the Global Connectional Conference, the duration of that meeting will be less than the current General Conference, perhaps by 3 or 4 days, resulting in a reduction in costs for that meeting. The most significant increase in costs will probably involve the meetings of the connectional conferences. This proposal would require each connectional conference to meet quadrennially prior to the Global Connectional Conference. Depending upon when and where the connectional conferences meet, the incremental cost of these meetings is estimated to be between $300,000 and $1 million US. The General Counsel on Finance and Administration would be asked to develop more accurate cost projections after General Conference when they see what happens to the proposal. Any incremental cost increases will also need to be examined in the context of the overall budget for the 2016 General Conference, which is over $10 million in U.S. currency. I know that we've presented a lot of information, and I expect that you're ready to ask some great questions. We are prepared to do our very best to answer them.
So, Sarah, one of our first questions is, it's difficult to visualize this plan and how it will work. Are there any structure and process charts to show the plan?
Unfortunately, there are not. I had somebody ask me for that about 2 weeks ago, and I thought it was genius, and we did not manage to make it happen in that time frame. We are hoping that that's something that we're going to be able to offer in the near future.
All right. Thank you, Sarah. Are we ready to move down to some of the questions that we have earmarked for the end of this presentation?
I think we are.
Yep.
Okay. Then I have a question now for Tracy to respond to. does this proposal provide for the full inclusion of LGBTQ persons, including same-gender marriages?
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate that question. I can tell you that our task force did talk about this, and I would share with you what would seem to unfold in terms of the full inclusion of LGBTQIA people. First of all, it's going to be important to understand, as Sarah said, that the General Conference will decide what is going to be considered in the Global Book of Discipline and what would be available for modification by the connections. So one of the considerations there as it relates to paragraphs addressing LGBTQIA matters is the General Conference, or in our case, the Global Connectional Conference, would have to put those in a category that would allow connections to modify them. If that happens, a connection could modify those paragraphs so that they would be more reflective of what it means to be in the context of ministry within the connection. I think we all understand that there are differing views regarding that across our denomination, and we believe it is therefore belongs and it's part of the responsibility of the connection to decide what that means to be more inclusive of LGBTQIA people.
The next question is for Marias. How do you plan to account for fairness with the large influx of clergy and other leaders in churches around the world?
Thank you. Accountability is a matter of great importance. And to our analogy, the best way for everyone to be accountable for is to transfer that accountability aspect to the local structures as much as possible. The annual conferences under the policies that will be designed by the regional conference and regional connection.
Okay, and the next question is for Sarah. Why does the plan call for each connection to set the standards for ordination when ordination is outlined as a property of the annual conferences under the current discipline in paragraph 33?
It is so nice to talk to people who are really paying attention. There are really two things happening with ordination in the Book of Discipline. As those of us who have gone through the process may remember, there's a number of questions that are outlined in the Book of Discipline, things that we are required to answer, and annual conferences have the authority beyond that to add requirements for ordination of their candidates. We are talking about the larger picture, the questions, the educational requirements, the things that are considered more universal now. We would be dropping those from the current global requirements, although these are things I understand to currently sometimes be adapted in some central conferences, and make them part of the connection. So in reality, we're giving more power in a more localized aspect. This is also one of the places that we're aware it could very well happen that a connection would have different rules for different regions within it, that some places may have more or less access to education or more or less access for funding to do international mission or pastoral education. So it is our expectation that we are talking in this case about the overriding provisions, and we are not taking any power away from annual conferences.
Thank you, Sarah. The next question is for Tracy, and it's a multi-part question. Were United Methodists outside the United States consulted in the creation of this plan? Any estimated number on how many participated? And does this plan use any of the research from the previous quadrennium's Committee on the Global Nature of the Church?
Thanks, Kevin. I will answer this in two parts. First of all, regarding the research performed by the Committee on the Global Nature of the Church, we had their reports, and we scoured them for information very early in our life as a task force. And And secondly, we did consult with some folks outside of the United States in the central conferences. We had extensive conversation with the Standing Committee on Central Conference Matters. In fact, a couple of the members of the task force and I met with their chairperson on more than one occasion. And we did discuss this with folks from the connectional table. In the last couple of weeks, I've had follow-up conversations with a number of folks from central conferences and have received some very positive feedback from them, including one bishop. It's difficult to say how many people we've actually spoken with from outside the United States, but I can say to you that we put stock in the feedback we received from the Standing Committee on Central Conference Matters, given their role within the denomination. Our expectation is that as we go forward, this actually has already been distributed to individuals in the central conferences and will continue to be.
And in a related question, has any board or agency participated in designing this plan as of yet?
Other than some reactions that we've heard from some boards here and there, there's been no specific input from the general agencies of the United Methodist Church at this point. As you'll note in the proposal, there's very little in here that impacts the general agencies. We chose not to decide which ones would be global agencies and which ones would be connectional agencies, and decided that that would be something that would be decided as this process unfolds.
All right, thanks again, Tracy. And the next question is for Sarah. In an age in which trust is in decline as well as congregants, how will restructuring increase transparency as well as oversight?
I really like this question. This sounds like the things that I spend my life thinking about. Our basic expectation is that having all of the power to make decisions about how all of the little minute things happen within local churches be currently with the global church is not always the best plan. There are many ways to structure churches as well as annual conferences, and there's not a lot of flexibility. I've heard a lot from my sisters and brothers in the central conferences about their frustration in needing to act as if they're a part of the United States when they need to do church, or when they want to do church, and where they are doing church. And so our expectation is that making more localized authority, and I recognize that a continent is not particularly local, but for us that's more local than things have been, gives people the opportunity to have more say in what's happening, and that inherently does increase transparency. In terms of oversight, I think that's the counterbalance of our plan, and we're trying to do a lot of balances. The things that really do matter on a global level, the issues that have to do with, say, global mining or immigration and migration around the world would be able to have global oversight, that things will get to be in the places they most belong.
Thank you, Sarah. Now I'm going to open this up for any of the presenters to respond to the following questions as we get to them. So the next question is, why should we hold on to separate regions in the U.S.? Who would like to take that?
Well, this is Tracy. I'd be glad to start. I can tell you that as we had our conversations around the task force table, we did talk about various options regarding the United States. And we frankly saw reasons for a number of different approaches. And our final decision was to propose that we keep the 5 regions in the United States and allow the connection in North America to see what it might like to do in terms of possibly changing or restructuring those regions. We felt that it was a significant responsibility if we were to come forth with a proposal that would change the nature of the 5 regions in the United States, and we didn't really feel that we had a strong consensus to go one way or the other. So therefore our proposal is saying let's form the connectional conference or the connection in North America and give that body a chance to see what it believes God is leading the connection to do regarding the structure here in the United States.
Thank you, Tracy. Our next question is, this plan seems to have similarities to the plan passed in 2008, only to have the constitutional amendments fail. How is this plan different, and how can we expect this plan to have any more success in being ratified?
Would someone like to take that?
Oh, that's all you, Tracy.
Well, again, I'll start, and I trust that Sarah and Mariah will add thoughts as they come to their minds. Granted, there are some similarities, but we believe that we have put in place some structures that are very valid from the standpoint of the connections that weren't in the proposal from 2008, and we believe that it's really important for those conversations to occur. I'm going to say regionally, but I really mean in the connections, in a way that we don't think was structured in that proposal. Yes, there are constitutional amendments that will be necessary to affect that, and we'll have to see where those go. We also believe that the state that we're in as a church right now is different from where it was in 2008. And there seems to be, at least as we're hearing it, more openness to some changes in structure. So I think those are 2 thoughts that I'd share with you at this point. And I'll also add that some of the structural components that we've got in our proposal weren't present, not just at the connectional level in the 2008 proposal. It was more of a change of names, and we think we've gone a little bit further in our concept, and also changing the general conference to a global connectional conference.
Tracy, if I might follow up on that, since I was specifically part of that conversation. One of the things the group was thinking about in trying to handle this differently, first of all, was by providing up front within the constitutional amendments what some of the major changes were in terms of shifting powers and responsibilities from one level to another, so that is immediately present in this first round of legislation. But then the really big difference is in the narrative plan that's presented and how that is being brought to general conference up front, so that question of if we pass these constitutional amendments, what happens next, is immediately answered. This general conference would be answering those questions and directing a legislation writing committee to write the legislation that would then enact that plan, so that there's much less room for questioning about what might come later, what might happen later if the initial phase of this plan is adopted.
Awesome answer, Kevin. Thank you for adding that in.
So the next question that we had was, when I think about what it takes to put together the votes for this proposal and other structural proposals, I wonder if this group is strategizing about ways this proposal might be tweaked or revised to make it easier, to make it more appealing to delegates who would not ordinarily consider it.
This is Sarah. I'm willing to offer initial thoughts on that. The first thing that we're trying to do is just get the word out that our proposal exists, and in fact this webinar is part of that work. We spent a lot of time thinking about what it takes to write a proposal that would be passable at General Conference, and One of the things that we think is really unique in this proposal is that everybody is designed to win. We aren't designing something where there are winners and losers. We really tried to make sure that there was value in this proposal for everyone, and we had hoped that because there is value for everyone, it would increase cooperation around the world. We have heard, when we've been able to receive feedback, that there is some frustration about not having ways to adapt in being church, and that happens in the United States and that happens outside of the United States. And we're really hoping that it's a good proposal and that that will carry some weight. And beyond that, we hope the Spirit might move.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, this is Morais. Let me add that, we continue to be open for any feedback, input, comments that would contribute to the success of this proposal. But other than that, I think that Sarah has summarized well our thought and expectations.
And this is Tracy. I guess I would add, as folks feel that they have aspects of the concept proposal that Kevin was alluding to, they should be prepared to bring those to General Conference if they're delegates, and in that legislative committee to have conversation around them. I don't think jealously guard exactly what we've presented, and would like to allow the General Conference to put its stamp of approval or make its mark on this concept proposal and actually encourage that.
Okay, it looks like we have time for one more question. So I think that next question is, what preserves our global connection from devolving into quadrennial fights over what should be global versus a matter of purview by each connection?
Someone has met the United Methodist Church. To some degree, what will happen in our vision is that these decisions will be made by one general conference, with hopes that just as the Book of Discipline is open for consideration at any given general conference, but not all of it actually gets changed, that there would eventually land in some consistency in that matter. But I think this question points out that that possibility might not be the only one, and that does seem like a potential issue.
Okay, we do have several other questions that we're out of time to answer, but we're going to be working on creating written responses to all of these questions and posting them for folks to be able to read later. But as we're coming up on the end of the hour, let me turn now to Sarah to lead us in a closing prayer.
Holy God, we thank you for the love we've experienced from you through the United Methodist Church and for the hope we have for the church of the future. May your wisdom and your patience guide us as we continue to pray, to discuss, to wonder about the possibilities for seeking your justice and sharing your love in the world. Amen.